Your manager just took credit for your project in front of the entire leadership team. Your teammate keeps missing deadlines affecting your work. Your direct report's performance is slipping, but you keep avoiding that conversation. Sound familiar? Today, I'm sharing a framework that helped me navigate these exact situations throughout my career. I'm Terry, and as a data scientist who's worked at a few big companies, I've had my share of uncomfortable conversations. From pushing back on unrealistic timeline to addressing team conflicts. What I've learned is that avoiding these conversations doesn't naturally make them go away. It only makes them worse. So today, I'll show you a practical framework for handling 3 types of difficult conversations that will come up constantly in your career. But first, let me tell you why this matters so much for your career. Here's the harsh reality. As you advance in your career, your success depends less on your coding skills and more on your ability to work with people. And people are messy, people are emotional, and people are sometimes difficult. I used to think technical excellence was enough. Then I watched brilliant engineers get passed over for promotions because they couldn't handle conflict. Meanwhile, colleagues with strong communication skills kept advancing. And now that I have your attention, let's dive into the framework. Most difficult conversations in your career fall into one of 3 categories. First, giving feedback, like telling a teammate their code quality is slipping. Second, resolving conflicts, like when you and your manager disagree on project priorities. And third, addressing harm, when someone's actions negatively impact you. Let me walk you through each one with real examples, starting with giving feedback. Picture this. Your teammate keeps submitting PRs with bugs that you have to fix. You're frustrated, but you don't want to seem mean. And so you keep fixing their code silently. This helps no one. Here's my 5-step approach for giving feedback effectively. Step number 1 is to set expectations early. Instead of surprising someone with feedback, establish this upfront. In my first one-on-one with any teammate, I would say, I want both of us to grow in our careers. If I ever notice something that might hold you back, I'll tell you. And I hope you do the same for me. Step number 2, schedule the conversation. Don't ambush people. Send a message like, hey, could we chat about the recent code reviews? What times work for you this week? And step number 3, frame it around their goals. Start with, I know you're working towards that senior engineer promotion. I noticed something in our recent code reviews that might be worth discussing. And step number 4, focus on behavior, not character. Say, I've noticed the 3 pull requests had memory leaks that caused production issues. But don't say, you're not very careful with your code. And step 5 is to explain the impact. When these bugs reach production, it creates emergency fixes that pulls the whole team away from sprint goals. It also affects our team's reliability metrics. Let me give you a real example from my own experience. Last year, I had to give feedback to a data scientist who was constantly over-engineering solutions. Instead of saying, you're making this way too complicated, I said, I've noticed our last few models took more than 6 months to implement. The business would prefer faster iteration. Could we discuss simpler approaches that still meet performance requirements? Notice how this focuses on the behavior, the long implementation timelines, and it connects it to business impact rather than attacking their character. Now, let's move to the second type of difficult conversation, resolving conflicts. The second type of difficult conversation happens when you and someone else want different things. Here's a common scenario. You think the team should focus on model accuracy. Your manager wants to ship fast. You're both arguing, but you're actually solving different problems. The key insight here is that there are 2 types of conflicts. First, figure out what type of conflict you're having. Are you disagreeing on the goals, as in what we should achieve? Or are you disagreeing on the methods, as in how should we achieve our shared goals? If it's conflicting goals, you need to dig deeper. Ask why to understand the underlying needs. Here's how this might sound. Why do you want to ship this model quickly? And the manager says, because leadership wants to see ROI on our ML investments. And then I say, what if we could show ROI without shipping the full model? Like a proof of concept that demonstrates value. If it's conflicting methods, focus on the shared goal and evaluate approaches objectively. Let me share a real example. I once disagreed with my manager about data collection methods. I wanted comprehensive user engagement data. He wanted to start building immediately. Instead of arguing about methods, I asked, what's driving this timeline pressure? And he said, we need to show progress to stakeholders in 2 weeks. And then I said, what if we could show shareholders a prototype with limited data that demonstrates our approach while collecting comprehensive data in parallel? We found a solution that met both needs. The key was understanding that we actually had the same goal, showing progress to stakeholders, but different ideas of how to get there. This brings us to the third and often the most emotionally charged type of conversation, addressing harm. This is when someone's actions have negatively impacted you. Think, your manager took credit for your analysis in the executive presentation. You're angry, but you also need to maintain this relationship. I use a simple 2x2 matrix to figure out how to handle these situations. Are they aware of the impact their actions had on you? And do they care about you and your well-being? This gives you 4 scenarios. If they're unaware but caring, have a diplomatic conversation to raise awareness. If they're aware and caring, ask for specific remedies. If they are aware but don't care, start planning your exit. If they are unaware and don't care, it's still worth to have one conversation to test if they actually care. Here's my 4-step process for the diplomatic conversation. Step 1. Identify the event naturally. Do you remember yesterday's executive presentation where the recommendation to restructure our data pipeline was discussed? Step 2. Ask for consent to discuss. I'd like to talk about how that meeting went for me. Would you be open to a 15-minute conversation this week? Step 3. Explain the impact using I statements. When the analysis was presented without mentioning my contributions, I felt like my work wasn't being recognized. This affected my visibility with leadership, which impacts my career growth. Step 4. Ask for what you need. In future presentations, I'd like my contributions to be acknowledged, or ideally, I'd like to present my own analysis. Here's a real example from early in my career. A colleague repeatedly interrupted me in meetings, and I used this framework. Do you remember today's stand-up when we discussed the modal performance issue? I'd like to talk about the meeting dynamics. Are you free for coffee this week? When I was explaining the root cause analysis and got interrupted 3 times, I felt like my technical input wasn't valued. As the person who investigated this issue, I wanted to ensure my findings are clearly communicated. In future technical discussions that I'm leading, I'd appreciate it if you could let me finish my explanations before adding questions or comments. The conversation went well because they were in the unaware but caring scenario, and the interrupting stopped after that conversation. Now, before I give you the homework, let me share the one thing that makes all of this framework actually work. Here's what I've learned after hundreds of these conversations. Make the implicit explicit. Most difficult conversations go wrong because people are implying things instead of stating them clearly. Instead of hinting that you're unhappy, say, I'm frustrated about this situation. Instead of assuming they know their impact, explain it directly. Instead of hoping they'll figure out what you need, ask specifically. I often say, let me make sure I understand what you're saying, and then repeat back what I heard. This prevents 90% of the misunderstanding. Think about it this way. When you're writing code, you don't leave critical logic implicit and hope the computer figures that out. You make it explicit. The same principle applies to human communication, especially in these high-stakes conversations. There are 3 things that will sabotage these conversations. First, having them over Slack or email. You should always do difficult conversations face-to-face or at least on a video call. Text-based communications lose way too much context and emotion. You read a message on Slack and think they're super mad and aggressive, but when you meet them in person, you might realize they're the most kind and understanding people. The non-verbal context matters a lot here. The second mistake is to make it about the character instead of the behavior. You should focus on specific actions and their impact, not personality traits. This way, people will feel less attacked and defensive, and more open to discuss the actual issue. And the third mistake is to avoid these conversations entirely. The longer you wait, the harder they become. The small issue today becomes a major problem next month. When you see a potential difficult conversation coming up, have it sooner than later, and your future self will thank you. Alright, let's talk about what you need to do next. Here's your homework. First, think of one difficult conversation you're avoiding right now. I'm sure you have one. Second, identify which type it is: feedback, conflict, or addressing harm. And third, write out the key points using the frameworks I shared. Please don't wing it. Prepare what you want to say, and this will make it less stressful for you as well. And fourth, schedule the conversation within the next week. Put it on your calendar right now. Remember, these conversations get easier with practice. The first few will still feel awkward, even with this framework, but each one builds your confidence and the skill. And here's something encouraging for you. Most people appreciate directness more than you think. They'd rather know where they stand than wondering what you're thinking. Difficult conversations aren't actually difficult because of the conversation itself. They're difficult because we avoid them until they become bigger problems. When you handle these well, people start seeing you as someone who can navigate complex situations. That's exactly the skill that separates senior contributors from everyone else. What's one difficult conversation you're planning to have this week? Let me know in the comments. And if this was helpful, subscribe for more career advice that actually works in tech. I'll see you in the next video.